the Global Proposals for a Sustainable Recovery webinar. I'm Carlos Mussi. I'm the director of the CEPAL office in Brazil, a CLAC office in Brazil, and I'd like to thank for the presence of all of you here, especially Mrs. Alice Pascoal, Representative Pascoal, and Senator Jacques Wagner, and many others. Sorry we're late. We had a few issues here, but we are ready to start. I'll be moderating this webinar. I'd like to say that this webinar is being recorded and broadcasted in both Portuguese and English via our YouTube channel, the ECLAC Interlace and Jacques Wagner's YouTube channel. I'd like to encourage you to ask questions via this little platform. You can access the platform directly via QR code that you can see on your screen. Or you can use your browser via slido.com, slido.com, and code 92209. We will be answering your questions. Hopefully, you can join and your questions will be answered. Our time is extremely short. I'll be asking for your patience for the speakers. Please restrict to the time you have been allotted. I'd like to start this webinar by giving the floor to Senator Fabiano Contarato, President of the Environment Commission of this Federal Senate. Then we're going to have Senator Jacques Wagner and Mr. Nick Fabiancic from the UN. So, Senator Fabiano Contarato, please, mic is yours. I'll be very clear and direct in my talk, given that there's no argumenting against facts. It's very important that we are taking part in this event, in this pandemic moment that the world is going through, especially Brazil. We have been extremely affected, the second country in the world. But unfortunately, it is my role on COP25 in Spain to provide for the first time an official document issued by the Federal Senate that proves the drawback in the environmental area in Brazil in many areas. So I was very saddened to provide this evaluation on the public policies of climate changes, and this official document proved that Brazil not only complied with the 2015 Paris Agreement, such as reduced deforestation, but has increased deforestation in the Amazon. And fires in up to 145% in the Amazon. So this document was official, issued by the Federal Senate, and I, as President of the Environment Commission, I pointed out what kind of public policies and the consequences of them for the Brazilian government in this essential human right, which is human environment, because as set out by the Article 255 by the Federal Constitution, the environment is a right of everyone, and all of us are entitled to it. So assessing the possibility of global proposals for sustainable recovery, for a green economy, I understand that should be done right now, and in this document we acknowledge this this environmental drawback that is connected. So we're going through COVID-19, but Brazil has achieved a historic record with authorization of 503 new kinds of fertilizers, like atrazine, cefacto, the herbicide that is 300 times bigger in Brazil. So I looked for information with the national health system, people that died because they used fertilizers. And I also visited some indigenous communities like the Caranis Kaiowás in Dourados, in Mato Grosso do Sul state. So this environmental drawback has hindered the deforestation project, the educational department, the secretariat of climate change. It fragilizes inspection departments like IBAM and CMBio. It denies science. This is not a politician speaking here because I belong to a mid-right, mid-left party. This is a fact. It's being proven by institutions, by accredited institutions, by federal universities, and extremely accredited institutes to test out all those information pieces. So it hinders inspection bodies. It has increased the number of fires by 145%. The Amazon that produces a day 2 billion tons of water. This water is going to make rain in the Midwest, in South and Southeastern Brazil. It's going to control the salinity in the ocean. And we would need, for all this whole service, 50,000 Itaipu power plants. So we need to work hard, effectively, with a global proposal towards a sustainable recovery, because you can match sustainability and leveraging economy, generating jobs and income. In Brazil, we have 70 million people that are poor or extremely poor. So I'm at your disposal as president of the Environment Commission for further qualification, and I wish you all a great meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I'd like to pass the floor to Senator Jacques Wagner. He's the president of the Under Commission of Big Push for Sustainability. And I'd like to thank his support and his support of his team for this webinar. Senator Jacques Wagner, the floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to Monsieur Pascal. She's in Europe, so it's afternoon already. I'm very glad to be here in this webinar. I'd like to thank the whole ECLAC team for the interaction that we have had in the Senate and your team, and to really produce in our big push of sustainability. This is the second event. The first was last year when we had our face-to-face meeting. And back then we didn't think we would suffer with over 500,000 deaths by COVID-19, over 57,000 in Brazil. And I send out my thoughts to all of those families. I'd like to thank all of those Palanites invited, Dr. Alice, ECLAC Executive Director, from the American Party, Democrat Party, American Albi, with us today. The Minister of Environment in Chile, she's the President of COP25. And to European Representative Pascal Canvan, he's the President of the Environment Commission of the European Union. And my fellow Senator Cantarato and other senators, and those who are watching us, this meeting today is critical because we are at a civilization corner. I think the world it adopts another development model. We're going to have crisis, not only the pandemic, health pandemic crisis, but the crisis of exclusion. There's an estimated 700 million humans in the planet living under the poverty line in 2020. We have crisis in the water supply and food supply, so we do need a change. Fortunately, that's what I want to highlight. The idea of the big push or the newer deal of the sustainability push is not to place, as Senator Cotarato said, we don't want to go against development and social inclusion against sustainability. So our concept is sustainability in the economy, environment, and social sustainability tripod. And we want to learn from the panelists that are going to show in America or Chile or Latin America or Europe what they're building. So just to save time, I'm really anxious to hear our panelists here. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Jacques Wagner. Mr. Nick is has some connection issues, and he'll be joining us later. And to move on with our webinar, I have the honor to pass the floor to Mrs. Alicia Alabasta, Executive Secretary of ECLAC. Alicia, you have the floor. Thank you. Good morning, Senator Fabiano Contarato. Good morning, Senator Jacques Wagner. It is a pleasure to be with you this morning. I am going to speak in English so I can give my presentation. Well, if I can do so, let me share my screen and let's see. Well, I got some issues here. I don't know why we won't let me, but I'm gonna get started. Can you see it? Yep. Camila? Yes, yes, we can. Perfect. Okay.
Of COVID-19 in Brazil in a very complex regional context and why a sustainable economic recovery is so urgent. So let me start by saying that health and climate crisis are part of the same, of an unsustainable development model. And because multilateralism is in crisis, there is growing inequality, climate change, of course, migration and demographic change, the technological and digital revolution, and geopolitical tensions that we are going through. And of course, our common resources are at risk: atmosphere, oceans, biodiversity. And of course, this is a model associated with a declining growth and trade, high inequality, with a predominance of the elites, the culture of privilege, based on negative externalities exceeding key global thresholds, and of course, with systemic vulnerabilities as evidenced by COVID-19. Now, the COVID-19 foreshadows the impact of climate change emergency. Both are global public bads. They arise from the abuse of nature. The inaction will have irreversible costs. They show the strategic value of public goods, require collective and simultaneous action and international cooperation. So I'm so glad that we are joined here by Pascal Confan from France. I think we are going to hear from him. And the Paris Accord, of course, is one of an essential step forward. The state has an essential role, as demonstrated by the crisis, but decisions must be based on science, as Senator Joseph mentioned, backed by multilateral scientific organizations. And whereas the COVID-19 crisis, there is a trade-off with economic activities, the response to the climate change has synergies with the economic activity if we do it right. And there are different responses, of course. The COVID-19 is marked by a sense of urgency and political will, while climate change is still lacking the political backing. Now, this crisis is a magnitude only comparable to the Great Depression of 1930. Look at us. 2020, we still don't know. It's going to be so strong. CEPAL estimated in April minus 5.3, but now we are near minus 8.5. And we are going to present those estimates next week. But this is unprecedented in many fronts. And of course, the case of Brazil is also a problem because the present crisis, again, doesn't have any precedent in Brazil for at least a century. And at least we calculate that the growth will fall at least minus 5.2 and even probably more. And the social impact is terrible. Almost 12 million more people are going to enter into the ranks of the unemployed, to add to 38 million. And 230 million people more will be in poverty, adding to 215 million at least. 16 more million will go to extreme poverty, adding to 83.4. And these 83.4 million people in poverty, in extreme poverty, also have a problem of hunger. And so we have to avoid converting this sanitary crisis into a food crisis, which is what could happen. ECLAC is suggesting an emergency basic income equivalent to one poverty line for 6 months for the entire population living in poverty in 2020. You in Brazil have already made a step forward in this regard, and we hope to hear from you, of course. In Brazil, there will be more than 6 million more people living in poverty. You can see this in the graph. At least 6 million more people living in poverty, and at least 240,000 people in extreme poverty. So we have to learn from this crisis and build back better. But our build back better has to be a build back better with equality. We know that natural capital has been decreasing at a very fast pace. Almost minus 140 million hectares have been lost. And again, Senator mentioned this very clearly for the Amazonian, Senator Contarate, and I really want to thank him for that. And we have to take this opportunity to build a momentum to call for a build back better. And as Antonio Guterres, our Secretary General, said, with the right actions, the COVID-19 can mark the rebirthing of a society as we know it today to one where we protect present and future generations. Look at carbon dioxide emissions that are growing so fast in Brazil, almost 4% than in the world. The world is growing at 2%, and Brazil is growing almost double in the recent years in average. And also, I want to mention that we have created in ECLAT a COVID-19 geoportal. This is a sort of an observatory which is presenting the information country by country through an interactive map. Measures that have been taken at the national level to address the pandemics in the following areas. We have addressed the issues of movement, restrictions, health, economy, employment, social protection, education, and gender. And I want to thank Nikki Fabiansik and Carlos Musi because they have been collaborating to update the geoportal for in the case of Brazil. So you can click in the case of Brazil and see how many actions have been taken on the fiscal front, on the monetary front, on the business policies. And I want really to thank our office in Brazil and Nikki Fabiansik, the resident coordinator. The countries of the region have implemented measures, and this is a synthesis of the measures that they have taken to contain the virus, to protect the workforce and the household income. Restrictions measures of travels, of course, fewer flights, border closure, with great impact on tourism, for example, particularly in the Caribbean, social distancing and total or partial quarantines, teleworking or teleeducation with great asymmetries in terms of connectivity. And of course, public spending has been reoriented to strengthen the health sector, but also they are dismantling other parts of the system, like environment, for example. And of course, there has been great impact or great progress in the protection of workers and income, and temporary support for the vulnerable and the poorest and the informal sectors. There has been some actions in terms of supporting small and medium-sized companies. And here you can see in the table what is the fiscal effort from the central governments. Of course, there are other actions that are more related to credits, but this is the fiscal effort, that is the spending from the public perspective. We have 5 proposals that we want to present to you today. First of all, the basic emergency income, equivalent to one line of poverty for the next 6 months, at least, that could be in a way the basis for a future universal basic incomes. In the short term, we believe that the fiscal space to design effective measures should be very much looked for. And of course, we have to go to international institutions for that. It's not going to be enough the public expenditure. We will have to look for credit lines in the IMF or in the World Bank, in the international financial institution. But in the medium term, which is what we have to discuss today, because what happens now is going to have an impact in the medium term, we have to formulate, we have to change our model of production structure with greater equality and sustainability. Senator Cotarate was mentioning Celso Furtado. Celso Furtado worked on this quite a lot, how to change the production structure with greater equality and sustainability. And we have to move towards a welfare state, because and for that we need a new social pact, a fiscally, socially productive, that includes the universalization of and access of rights and universal basic income and a system of care. We have proven that this crisis took us on surprise and with very fragmented health systems and protection systems. And of course, I have to insist on this: promote regional and sub-regional integration. The world is going to be very different in the economic geography, so we have to move toward this direction. And of course, we need a fiscal compact, a stable fiscal space that should not be as a trade-off of the social protection system. We have to reduce tax evasion and fiscal expenditure, which is very high in our region, and definitely we have to go to a progressive tax structure, especially for the richest 1%, and reassess the tax incentives to support productive and social investments, and look for a new generation of taxes. And of course, there are measures that we can take, and Brazil has done it in the past with very good, I would say, results. And we have to redirect the idle capacities and investment to boost productivity and environmental sustainability. We have put together an observatory of Agenda 2030, which we believe is the travel map, the direction of travel. And we have, of course, indicated in this webpage that is available to all of you, is like a knowledge hub that we have created with all these agencies, funds, and programs of our system, in which we present what each country is doing in terms of Agenda 2030. Here we have the voluntary national reviews of Brazil since 2017, and all the institutions, the statistics, what is happening in Brazil. And of course, you can also click in SDG by SDG, and you will see what is happening in each one of them. We believe it's time for a big push for sustainability, and this has to change the unsustainable development routes. Inaction tends to aggravate the development gaps, and of course, we need sustainable investments to develop this route of transformation. And I want to thank Camila Gramco because she has done a tremendous job for Brazil. And we have, and the work she's doing is really, I would say, a precursor of what we're doing in the rest of the region. She has identified what are the sectors that are drivers for structural change. For example, in Brazil, of course, energy, agriculture, industrial processes. And you can see in the graph that in Latin America and the Caribbean, the most important, I would say, contribution to gas emissions is from agriculture and livestock. Of course, energy is 45%, but compared to the world, which is 70%. So we have to look into agriculture. We have to look into land use changes, because that's where we have to find nature-based solutions, circular economy, smart cities, sustainable infrastructure, and of course, less polluting consumption and the care economy. And no question about the renewable energy. So we have challenges and opportunities for Brazil to build back better. Of course, the economic recovery, but we have to make it a green recovery. We have spoken about a multicolored recovery, actually, because we need the women, purple, we need the green, of course, but we need also the red, which is financing, and the blue, which is the oceans. But we need this recovery to have all these, I would say, aspects and low carbon investments that can be a big push for growth. And we have to make sure that we understand that carbon lock-in is very costly, and it's difficult to escape. This is the center periphery, I would say, paradigm that we have to break. And constrained fiscal policies demand smart policies and coordination challenges among, I would say, all the sectors of the economy. We have, and again, thanks to Camila and to Carlos Musi, we have created a repository of the cases about big push for sustainability in Brazil. You can enter into this webpage, and you will find many examples that are very good examples for the whole of the region on infrastructure, on biodiversity, on education, on industry that Brazil is carrying out. And this is extremely important. And of course, in Brazil, we have to highlight that Brazil is really showing progress in terms of energy transition and the net job creation. You will see that when we compare, we will find that value added generation of each of the gigawatts in terms of different types of generation technology, like fossil, like total renewable, hydroelectric, biomass, solar, or wind, we will find that the value added is very important for this generation. And of course, it can be a big push for the economy. So examples of investment with positive social, economic, and environmental impacts in Brazil are here. Four of them. Rapid expansion of wind power, which is already, it has mobilized 8.2 million of investments and created more than 250,000 jobs. The modern steel industry complex in the state of Ceará that adds value to Brazil's largest iron reserves has mobilized $5 billion in investments and employs around 50,000 people. And the community-led sustainable investments in the Amazon, strengthening indigenous communities and add value to their products and foster traditional ways of living. And investing in the improving of the agroforestry systems in Rio Grande do Sul that have increased productivity, income for rural economies with 2.5 thousand per year per family. So you can see that it is possible, and Brazil is demonstrating that. So finally, I would say that to respond to the pandemic, this is an opportunity to move towards a big push for sustainability. A new pattern of development is urgent, aligned with 2030 agenda, a welfare state and universal social protection systems in a new equation with the market and the society. The role of the state, of course, is very important. And public-private pacts for an agricultural, agroecological transition, renewable energy, and integration of digital economy. I think these three sectors are fundamental, and progressive fiscal policies to expand the fiscal space with incentives towards equality and sustainable investments. Job creation is possible and transition to a carbon-free economy. But we need what? We need institutions, we need coalitions, and you, the senators, can do a lot for this purpose of formulating and implementing policies that could be of great impact globally, regionally, and of course nationally and locally. And we have to make sure that our horizon is equality, that progressive structural changes is the path, and politics the instrument. And let me recall here Celso Furtado. Celso Furtado said always that o punto de partida de cualquier nuevo proyecto alternativo de nação terá que ser inevitável.
The starting point of any alternate nation project should be the increase of the participation of the people in the center of decision of the country.
Muito obrigada.
Muito obrigado, senhora Alissa. Muito obrigado pela.
Thank you, Alissa. Thank you for reminding us of Celso Furtado. Mr. Niki Fabiancic, we just solved the problem of connection, so I will give you, Mr. Fabiancic, 5 minutes to make your comments, and I appreciate your participation. Niki, you have the floor. Mr. Niki?
Ok, parece que não.
Okay, so it seems like the problem still goes on. I'm so sorry. So now we are going to move on with our webinar, and I'm honored to pass on the floor to Mr. Pascal Canfin. He's a representative on the European Parliament. He's the president of the European Parliament's Environmental and Environment Committee and leader of the European Alliance for a Green Recovery. Mr. Canfin, good morning. We are honored to listen to you. You have the floor.
So, if ever there is a technical problem, please give me a signal, okay? So, happy to be part of this webinar. my understanding of what you expect from me is to share where we are and what we start doing at the European level in terms of green recovery. Because we are in a slightly better situation now than a month ago from the sanitary perspective. I know that in your region, you're far from being in a post-COVID-19 world. In Europe, even if there is still the risk of a second wave, things are moving in the right direction and we start recovering. But definitely the majority of political forces are in favor of not recovering as we used to be, but on the contrary, to use the huge amount of public money that will be injected in the economy, and I will give you some figures, precisely in order to speed up the green transition. So at the European level, the recovery package is 750 billion. And these 750 billions will be focused all over Europe on what we call the twin transitions, the digital transitions, and the green transitions. There will be a couple of principles that will guide the investments for this 750 billion. The first principle will be what we call the do not harm principle, meaning no money going to projects that will be detrimental to our climate agenda. So no fossil fuel, things like that. And then the selected projects to be invested in will have to be under the framework of our climate and energy plans to climate neutrality. You might know that the European Union has set a new goal for itself, being climate neutral in 2050, which is, to our view, aligned with the Paris Agreement we all signed. And we are in a process of designing the first climate law for the EU in order to strengthen our objectives for 2030. You know that our climate objective for 2030 is minus 40% compared to 1990, and we will land somewhere between minus 50 and minus 55, and more likely to minus 55. So minus 55% is on the trajectory to go to climate neutrality in 2050. So that's the new objectives. But of course, in terms of reaching these objectives, we need to invest and invest more. So that's why we want to use this huge amount of public investment that will be injected in the next, let's say, over the next 2 to 3 years, and of course, starting very soon, but over the next 2 to 3 years in the European economy, in order to speed up the transition and in order to reach our new upgraded climate goals. So we will follow the climate and energy plans of the member states, and each investment in key sectors such as construction, energy, agriculture, transportation, industry, so the key highly emitting sectors. Each investment that will not be part of these plans to reach climate neutrality will not be financed by the European Recovery Plan. So it means that it's a very strong commitment we are taking, and it's very clear that, let's say, 2 to 3 months ago, when the COVID-19 crisis started, there was a risk of the Green Deal agenda being a bit sidelined. And actually what is happening is exactly the opposite. That the mainstream thinking is that we shouldn't do what we did 10 years ago for the last crisis in 2009, when we injected again a lot of public money, raising public debt, but without taking the climate issue properly into account. And more or less, we lost a decade. So that's why we, this time, not to make this mistake again, and there is a quite broad consensus to go down that line. Yes, of course, within the EU, you have differences between North and South, West and East, but I mean, the very broad consensus is to get there. And maybe to conclude, we have now, with this, we have now I would say, two different, we are in a different situation compared to 10 years ago, when we had this 2009 crisis and the last recovery packages. The first difference is the cultural maturity in Europe, within European citizens, for climate action. I mean, 10 years ago, it was not really a strong expectation within the European citizens. It was there, but not as a top priority. Now, when you look at the polls all over Europe, including in the eastern part of Europe, countries like Poland, for instance, it's growing, and for the young generations, it's the #1 top priority, climate action. And the second difference is the technological maturity. I mean, we consider in the EU that, of course, there is still things to be found in terms of carbon storage, in terms of hydrogen, things like that. But we have almost all the technologies we need. And if they are not there yet, they are just for the next couple of years. And all the EU big companies are invested in the new solutions. So we have the cultural maturity, and we have the technological maturity, which means that as we are going to inject a substantial amount of money, then we give us a chance to reach our targets. And when I say targets, it's not only the target we have today, but the upgraded target we are about to set. So I don't know to what extent this could be of inspiration for you. I'm fully aware that the political context in Latin America and in Brazil specifically is very different. So I'm not saying that you just have to copy-paste, obviously, but at least it could give you the sense that in the EU, we are doing our homework, we are doing it very seriously, and we try to be consistent with what we signed in Paris five years ago, precisely in order to deliver. Then some people in Europe say, well, we are only 9% of the the global EU CO2 emissions, 9%. So what's the point? What's the point in having climate neutrality in EU if it's not the case in India, in Brazil, in China, in the US, in Canada, in Japan, and so on? It's true. From a climate perspective, it's true. But from a political perspective, it's obvious that if developed countries, as we said, do not demonstrate that there is a pathway to go for carbon neutrality without destroying our economy, because it's clearly not what we want to do, then how come others could be convinced? So it's the contrary. The idea is to precisely create some leverage, demonstrating that it's feasible. I'm not saying that we know exactly how we are going to get there, because there is a lot of uncertainty, but we want to create this pathway, and then also to be able to leverage it outside the EU. And that's the clear goal of the EU Commission and of the main governments, France, Germany, and others, supporting this objective at European level and domestically, and again this broader political agenda. That's it from my side. I don't know if there is a Q&A later on, but I think it was the main messages I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you, Mr. Pasquale, Congressman from the European Parliament. You made quite an important point, since we have the pandemic, the sanitary crisis, you have the climate crisis, and we have what Ms. Alicia Bárcena said at the beginning, the multilateral crisis. And I think we need to see how other regions, how is the world really taking the task of confronting all of these two very evident crises, the climate and the sanitary, but also the multilateral. And that's why we have here the honor to have Congresswoman Deborah Haaland from the US, from the great state of New Mexico. And we'll give her the floor so we can conclude our multilateralism. We started with Latin America, went to Europe, and now we can hear the US and the proposals of the Green New Deal, and maybe the multilateral crisis can be resolved a little, maybe after November. Thank you, Congresswoman Deborah, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm honored to be here with all of you. And today I'm hopeful about all of us taking the necessary steps to save our planet. Good morning. I hope all of you are well, and I hope I can add to this important conversation about the present and future of our planet. I'm one of the first 2 Native American women elected to the United States House of Representatives, and my family has lived in what is now the state of New Mexico for 35 generations. As a Pueblo woman, I was raised to feel connected to the earth and to carry on the legacy of environmental stewardship of countless generations who came before me, who took seriously their responsibility to pass our natural treasures on to future generations. I learned from my parents to revere nature, and throughout my life, I have worked to protect our open spaces, our air, and our water. As a candidate for Congress, I made the issue of climate change and the environment central to my campaign because I believe it's the greatest challenge of our time. Along the way, I endorsed and co-sponsored the Green New Deal, a proposal for big structural change and transformation of the American economy to tackle the twin crises of inequality and climate change. It's a proposal to mobilize vast public resources to help us transition from an economy built on exploitation and fossil fuels to one driven by dignified work and clean energy. While the Green New Deal was initially proposed before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, it still provides a valuable path forward for our country, which needs good jobs and needs to address inequities that were revealed even more starkly by the pandemic. For example, in my home state of New Mexico, Native Americans make up 11% of the population, but are more than half of the coronavirus positive cases. Across the United States, Native Americans and African American communities have a COVID-19 hospitalization rate that is 5 times that of non-people of color, and Hispanics are hospitalized at a rate that is 4 times that of whites. Why is that? A legacy of environmental racism and injustice has left some people far more susceptible to the ravages of COVID-19 than others, and it's left them with less access to the health care that they need. Years of exposure to radiation from uranium mining and nuclear weapons testing, to methane leakage from oil and gas drilling, and to industrial chemicals from factories in their neighborhoods have caused underlying health conditions that make these communities of color more vulnerable, and it's costing them their lives. These inequities, combined with some very public examples of racial bias in our police system, have brought the issue of racial justice and inequity to the forefront of American politics. And although we are working hard to address the policing and justice issues in Congress right now, we also must do all we can to get at the root of the environmental injustice as well. The Green New Deal sets out several goals and principles to address these systemic historical inequities and to stop damaging our climate. The Green New Deal will work to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions through a fair and just transition for all communities and workers. It will create millions of good high-wage union jobs with strong worker rights, benefits, and protections, ensuring prosperity and economic security for all people who live in the United States. It will invest in the infrastructure and industry of the United States to sustainably meet the challenges of the 21st century. It will secure clean air and water, climate and community resilience, healthy food, access to nature, and a sustainable environment for all. And it will promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing the historic oppression of frontline and vulnerable communities. There are a number of ways we can achieve these goals. We can create millions of family-sustaining jobs by replacing lead pipes, weatherizing homes, expanding railways, or manufacturing wind turbines, which will enable millions of workers to lead the transition to a new economy. We must provide training and advancement opportunities so that workers can transition out of old polluting fossil fuel industries and into these new clean energy jobs. And we must ensure that the work is led by local firms, organizations, and cooperatives. We must make startup financing available to people who want to form new companies, taking care to direct those investments to the communities that have been denied capital and development opportunities for generations past. We can reduce greenhouse gas emissions through investments in infrastructure and industry. By investing in smart grids for renewable energy distribution, encouraging energy efficient manufacturing, expanding low emissions public transit, deploying more solar and wind generation and battery storage, and upgrading or replacing buildings to maximize their energy efficiency, water efficiency, safety, and durability, we can significantly reduce climate pollution. By cleaning up hazardous waste sites, replacing stormwater systems, and reducing toxic air and water pollution from oil, gas, and coal, we can clean our air and water. By promoting local and family farming, we'll keep our soil healthy, minimize particulate air pollution, and reduce toxic runoff of pesticides and herbicides. Those benefiting the most would be the communities of color and low-income families who today endure disproportionate exposure to these toxins. The Green New Deal will promote racial and economic justice by helping working class families slash their energy bills and reduce their transit costs by offering more energy efficient homes, access to affordable wind and solar power, and more reliable options for affordable public transportation. It will help climate exposed communities to build bridges that can withstand floods, restore wetlands that buffer hurricanes, and shield coastlines from sea level rise. And the benefits will disproportionately go to the working class families and communities of color that have endured disproportionate economic and environmental hazards for decades. The Green New Deal must counteract systemic racism and economic exploitation by giving hard-hit communities priority access to new job opportunities, cost savings, pollution cleanup projects, and climate resilience initiatives. As I'm sure most of you know, there are big obstacles for us to do all of this. Primary among those, President Trump, who has installed people who have made their living from promoting extractive industries into positions of power in our agencies that were created to protect our public lands and natural resources. and they are all working to exploit rather than protect our most historical and fragile environments. Currently, our public lands emit a full 25% of the carbon into our atmosphere. We had to beg and plead to extend public comment periods on new oil and gas drilling projects due to the pandemic. Projects like these have caused a huge methane cloud to form over the northwest corner of my state of New Mexico, which has aggravated medical conditions like asthma that make people more vulnerable to COVID-19. People couldn't attend those meetings to give their comments on these plans because they were staying at home to stay safe. And many of the people most affected by new gas and oil leases on our public lands are Native Americans who don't have internet connectivity or computers, so they couldn't participate in online meetings or submit their comments via the website. We also face hurdles in our Senate, which is controlled by President Trump's party. They have attacked the Green New Deal, claiming it would ban air travel and even cows, and that it would mean cutting our military in half. Those things are not in the Green New Deal that I co-sponsored, but the attacks show that we have obstacles to overcome. But we remain hopeful that we can bring about some changes in our November elections that will make protecting our planet and moving the Green New Deal forward more possible. For now, we're working on ways to implement the Green New Deal. The House of Representatives will be voting on an infrastructure bill later this week that invests in climate-friendly transportation and development, includes my bill to ensure that our electricity transmission infrastructure is able to support greater use of renewable electricity, and reshapes our tax code to incentivize renewable energy options. Tomorrow, our House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis will release a 500-page set of policy recommendations for actions we can take. And I'm very appreciative that Speaker Nancy Pelosi appointed this committee. I'm proud that several things I have been working on are likely to be in the plan. My Climate Stewardship Act promotes reforestation, climate-friendly farming practices that restore healthy soils, and restore or protect coastal wetlands, which will take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. The 100% Clean Economy Act, which sets a nationwide goal of achieving 100% clean energy economy by 2050 across all sectors of our economy, from transportation to manufacturing to electricity. And my 30-30 by resolution to save nature, which sets a national goal of preserving 30% of the oceans and land in the United States by 2030. This will protect vital habitat for wildlife and promote natural carbon sequestration. On this last point, I'm beginning to work with a coalition of international partners to promote the global concept of protecting 30% of our planet's oceans and lands by 2030. I've also just started talking with some of my colleagues and advocacy groups about crafting a green recovery package to achieve many of the Green New Deal goals. It's likely to include a number of things that my colleagues and I have been urging our leadership to include in the pandemic response legislation to make a transformational investment that will build a smart, more sustainable future for workers and families and our planet. The details are still under discussion, but we will address the key principles of creating good jobs for the clean energy economy and assisting those who work in climate polluting industries to transition into the new economy, investing in vulnerable communities on the front lines of climate change and pollution through remediation and cleanup of contaminated areas, public health and education infrastructure, housing improvements, broadband development, and economic diversification, and guaranteeing free, prior, and informed consent for all projects affecting Indigenous people or territories. Building an economy that benefits all of our people, not just the wealthiest among us. Ensuring that all stimulus investments are consistent with limiting further climate breakdown, and protecting our environment by investing in food systems, public lands, and public spaces and prioritizing environmental restoration and remediation projects. One thing we've learned from this pandemic is how much human behavior and government policies impact our environment. The unprecedented steps the world has taken to slow the spread of the virus while putting a strain on our economy have dropped atmospheric nitrogen dioxide levels and turned once hazy skylines crystal clear. This must be a turning point. We must listen to our planet and act now. As we all work on legislation to help our economies recover from this pandemic, it is imperative that we do so in a way that supports a just transition to a clean economy. The status quo leaves millions behind, and it exposes working class families, communities of color, and others to stagnant wages, toxic pollution, and dead-end jobs. The climate crisis only magnifies these inequities as hard-hit communities are hit even harder by storms, droughts, and flooding, and they lack the resources needed to adapt and cope with these natural disasters. The Green New Deal is a plan to upgrade our infrastructure, revitalize our energy system, retrofit our buildings, and restore our ecosystems that will cut climate pollution while creating millions of family-sustaining jobs, expanding access to clean air and water, raising wages, and building climate resilience. To counteract inequality, those benefits will go first and foremost to the working families and communities of color that have endured the brunt of the fossil fuel economy. Thank you again for having me here today and for being committed to saving our planet and everything and everyone that lives here. I will always be a reliable partner in the work that lies ahead for this purpose, and I'm just very grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Deborah Haaland. Thank you very much for keeping exactly to the second of the time. Congratulations for you and your staff for making such a specific and great statement. We're going to have right now a recorded video. I'm going to go back to Portuguese now. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, those that are following us.
Circumstances. I want to thank the Federal Senate of Brazil, the Economic Commission.
Alô? Bem, vamos ter...
So we're going to...
And the German International Cooperation Institute for holding this webinar on a crucial topic that we must face urgently: how we can deliver a sustainable green recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. COVID-19 is having terrible human costs with devastating effects on our people's health, livelihoods, and the entire economies. According to the ECLAC, COVID-19 will lead to the biggest contraction in the economic activity in our region's history, a 5.3% drop in 2020. Unemployment is expected to reach around 11.5%, which means that more than 37 million people will be without work. That will turn to 30 million more people in poverty throughout the region. How we respond to this economic crisis will be a top priority for the international community. But this priority is all the more important because the strategies that we can develop to recover from the effects of COVID-19 will be decisive in our ability to address the other existential global crisis that we are facing: climate change. Global warming, it's not in quarantine. For this reason, it is critical that the economic recovery plans countries will develop create the conditions to foster a virtuous circle of economic growth, job creation, and just transition towards fostering a low carbon and resilient economic model. In Chile, there are two key elements of our policy framework that will guide this sustainable recovery. First, the commitment that was established in our new NDC, which we update and present to the international community last April, in the middle of the health crisis. with a significant increase in ambition and commitments. Most importantly, this new NDC includes a social pillar which acts as an anchor, linking our climate commitments to the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and setting a just transition strategy for the decarbonization of the energy sector. This 2030 NDC commitments agenda is central to ensuring a sustainable and inclusive recovery. Second, our national commitment to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, which is the founding principle of our climate change law, now being debated in our Congress. As part of the journey to implement our 2050 carbon neutrality goal, last month, we launched an extensive stakeholder engagement process for the development of our long-term climate strategy. This will ensure a robust and inclusive approach to defining sectoral goals and mitigation and adaptation indicators that will shape our path to carbon neutrality. We are fostering these changes because we are convinced of the importance of the environmental and social agenda, but also because the vast economic benefits it brings. Our NDC and 2050 target is the starting point to unlock enormous investments and job creation opportunities in the expanding green sectors, from renewable generation and energy efficiency to electromobility and nature-based solutions. In Chile, reaching carbon neutrality by 2050 will require a $40 to $50 billion investment. However, the savings in operation and maintenance of these new investments will bring results in a net positive economic benefit for our country of more than $30 billion. And more important, this economic net benefit multiplies by 5 when we add the tremendous economic co-benefits of air quality improve and health being and society and natural ecosystem well-being. But this picture isn't unique to Chile. Clean technologies are cheaper than have been ever. In many countries, solar and wind power is already cheaper than electricity from coal and fossil power plants. Simply put, there has never been a better time to back these clean energy technologies. A global study by Lord Nicholas Stern and other economists from the University of Oxford has shown us that after the financial crash of 2008-2009, stimulus measures with focus on green sectors deliver the strongest economic results in terms of economic multiplier effects and job creation. Chile, as a developing country, has proposed its new NDC and climate change law based on our own reality and national circumstances. We are fostering the highest possible ambition as stipulated by the Paris Agreement. We are convinced that enhancing our ambition is an ethical, social, and also economic issue. This is our call, and I want to encourage other countries to join us on this call. Today, we have an opportunity to show leadership, to improve people's lives and future. Let's present enhanced NDC and sustainable recovery plans with long-term climate strategies that helps our societies to recover from COVID-19 in a cleaner, more inclusive, and sustainable way. We have the opportunity to build back better. Thank you.
Muito obrigado a todos. Esse foi o vídeo.
Thank you to all of you. This was the video from Carolina Schmidt, Minister of the Environment of Chile, also the chairwoman of the COP25 held in Spain and co-sponsored by Chile. I believe that she brought us this message of the relevance of the multilateral cooperation worldwide, and also the example of what Chile is doing. And also, these presentations and comments that we have made up to now show how the legislative branch in Brazil is doing, and we are not idle. We are holding activities and actions, just like Alicia said. She provoked the legislative in order to take action, and taking actions and proposing measures to discuss the future of investments. I would like now to pass on the floor to Senator Stephenson Valentin, the rapporteur of the Big Push for Sustainability Subcommission. And with that, we will also have the participation of the Brazilian Senate in this event. Senator Stevenson Valentin, you have the floor. Good morning. Thank you to all of you who are watching this webinar. Well, I was listening closely to the lecturer speaking about sustainability, and I think, and I am a young man, I entered politics recently. I think we have to face the challenge that is new, and we have to bring people to this discussion, because everyone agrees that we have to save the planet. Nobody thinks it's nice to destroy the reservations and the economy and the devouring of our forests and our reserves. But I think what people lack is this awareness of the consumption that nowadays we don't really discuss. And it is the consumption of people who have to understand where this product comes from and the origin of what they consume. Because even fashion, you know, that dress that you use with that cotton made by the hands of somebody in the northeastern region of Brazil, somebody with high needs of economic growth. And if we can establish through the economic actions, we can establish the sustainable means to elaborate legislation for protection of these people, understanding that the economy depends on those people and we should use their work rationally, and people should have the understanding. And I also mentioned my colleague here, Jacques Wagner. We understand that this consumption, well, if we are going to not use so much electricity right now, people in the Caatinga region will still use wood and use other means to obtain food, and they will probably have to hunt for food under the protection of law just to get food on the table. So the pandemics brings us this reflection. Once we are within the residencies here in Brazil, we are locked up in our residences. We didn't leave it for a while, so we understand now how much trash we have and we produce, how many plastic bags we use and cans and all of that. And I think we could convert that, the population could convert that, be they aware of that or not, as convert that into some benefit to society. Nowadays, the politics are of separating trash and the consumption. And we are now discussing right now in this webinar something that is not only for the country, but also other countries like France and the United States. And saving the planet is in everyone's hands, and everyone should be aware of the products that they consume, the origin of the product, and we should have more awareness and consciousness of what is going on. However, the Brazilian Senate is also, the senators are very much worried with the sustainability and the construction of not only social but also economical and environmental preservation. We are always fighting for the best, not only for our country but also for the people as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Senator Stevenson. Valentin, you brought us a very important perspective from Rio Grande do Norte state. And of course, we have always to remember the three pillars: economic, the social, and the environmental pillar, and the survivability and the growth of everyone in terms of employability and income. So I think you brought us a great point. So I now have the honor of inviting Senator Confúcio Moura, the Vice Chair of the Big Push for Sustainability Subcommission on the Senate, to take part in the discussion and bring his perspective on the challenges that we have. Mr. Moura, you have the floor. Thank you. It's a huge pleasure to be here. It is a huge pleasure to be here. it's great to be part of this debate promoted by our subcommission, by our chairman, Jacques Wagner. Well, the possible ways to have the sustainable growth in Brazil are basically two. We have now. What to do now? Well, we have now to comply with the legislation and have inspections going on. So what we have to do now is to practice what we already have in terms of legislation, which is very good, by the way, and from our constitutions and our forest code. And second is to prepare the next generations through schooling, preparing the children. As soon as schools come back to action, inserting this topic of the environment as a very important topic to form the next generation, because they will have to also get busy with these environmental issues. And those are two subjects that I think are very important. And when we speak about the environment, we know that whatever is correct ecologically and what is socially just and what is feasible economically. For instance, agribusiness, the production in Brazil of protein for exports of meat, swine meat, cattle, and so on, and also soy and other commodities that we have in Brazil. So all of this movement of the production, the national production, will depend a lot on the buyers, the international buyers. How are they going to demand quality in the origin of the product? Should this product be certified? Should this product from Brazil be tracked? Should it be of good origin? It can't be planted in areas of conservation, in indigenous areas. So this environment and this external force of the countries that are going to buy Brazilian assets are very important, so that we can have a reaction. Another topic that I think is very important for the possible paths forward for Brazil's development is the issue of poverty. There is nothing worse for the environment than poverty. Poverty is humiliating, and as a consequence, whoever has no income and is poor, they have a tendency of not following the principles of preservation of the environment. They have to survive barely, and that is very important. Another side of the national policy within Brazil, I'm speaking about within Brazil, is to understand how the Brazilian municipalities are doing their homework. I will bring you the example of my state of Rondônia in the Amazon. The municipality of Guarujá-Mirim has 95% of its territory under preservation, rivers and forests. However, it is a poor municipality. The indigenous communities are rather forgotten, the traditional populations as well. And this work that we develop and that we have to develop is to think about them and see if they are doing their homework and what do they gain with that, what is the feedback that they have. And they tend to do what the others do because they want to deforest, because deforestation seems to lead to meat and soy and milk and resources. So the Brazilian environmental policy in Brazil, first of all, we have to be aware that the policy for the environment in Brazil is a duty of the state. So not the state, the power of the state itself, but the society as a whole, the state as society, as a partnership with the private initiative, a partnership with the non-governmental organizations that are working very well in Brazil. So this partnership, hand in hand with everyone else, it is really important so that we can overcome this crisis. Nothing of this, we don't have to have anything to do with this negationist policy that is really incentivizing the deforestation and other practices that are not very healthy for the environment. that is happening right now that are happening right now in Brazil. So we have to have a good wave, just like this seminar, like this event here today, promoted by our subcommission in the Senate with Jacques Wagner's and others. It is really important to create this environment that allow us to discuss the environmental agenda as a priority. I believe that these are the most important points that I have to share with you. And in the Amazon, we have a very specific thing, a very important, it's paramount, which is the regulation of land, regulation of areas of land. This is very, very important. And other factors that we can work here. For instance, well, in the state of Amazonas in Brazil, which is the biggest one in territory, the Zona Franca, the commercial zone in Manaus is an industry powerhouse created in the Amazon with the objective of producing incentivized production of electronics and other products. However, this had and still has a huge environmental effect and damage for the Amazon. So we can create other places like that that will be very important too, so that the depressed regions, the damaged regions, can have protections and advantages in order to protect the environment, so that the municipalities can adhere to these policies, these environmental policies. Good luck to all, and thank you.
Obrigado, senador.
Thank you very much, Senator. You brought us many very important points. I believe you still even come back to one of the first definitions of sustainable development, which is not damaging the next generations and the future generations. And I think the way out of this is education. And you brought us this very important warning about all that and about all of those regional points that we have here. I would like to now take the moment to bring some questions that we have from people who are watching us. The first question that I want to put forward is, and I think many participants have that, is the issue of financing. I believe that many proposals are being brought forward, and the topic of financing is present all the time. And I think that whatever you can say, Mr. Pascual, Debra, senators, and also Alicia, I think we can have a roundtable about this topic of financing and the proposals for this recovery, this green recovery. I'm not sure if Ms. Alicia would like to begin, or do we have any other participants that would like to take the floor? Jacques Wagner has asked for the floor. Go on. Well, I'm not sure if I'll still have the opportunity to speak in the closing section. If I don't have that opportunity, I just want to thank you all. You will. Okay, so about financing, since I will have time to thank you all and to draw my final conclusions, well, I think it's very important because we have now in many newspapers in Brazil today the letter that was sent to many Brazilian embassies abroad by many investment funds that are telling us how much Brazil can lose in terms of attractiveness in order to receive financing from other countries due to the posture that we unfortunately have in the federal level of the government in Brazil. The current government is having, and it is having a posture that is behavior that is really on the opposite way of whatever we are thinking about this crisis, and since before the crisis of the COVID crisis, and even more now, because we don't have any means to disconnect the pandemics from global warming. I'm not saying that this is a consequence, but I'm saying that even if you have proposals of closing countries and having barbed wire between countries, the main house is the planet Earth, so we can't run away from that. And planet Earth due to climate change and global warming, it will affect everyone. And the pandemics and the virus, that will, of course, be, we will understand that it is a consequence of the unbalance of the environment. We are pretty sure that this will go over any barriers that any country can put forward. So I think it is very important to have the managers of funds, and I will take advantage of the words of our representative Pascal, in order to assess, to affirm that again, to state that again. If we have environmental maturity and also technological maturity, and unfortunately we have to advance in this maturity, since we have what we heard from Stevenson, the senator, and also Moura, Mr. Confucio Moura. I am pretty sure that this sanction, I will call it a sanction, it is quite an education measure. So I hope we can feed, as it has been said in the European case. I hope it comes also the example to Brazil, to our region, in order to have the projects being forced to dialogue with the project for sustainability, environmental, social, and economic sustainability. Thank you, Senator. Alicia, you would like to bring any comments?
Sí, muchas gracias. Muito obrigada. Yes, I want to mention two things. One is I am very concerned that the Paris Agreement, I don't know if Pascal Canfin is still with us, but I believe that we have, in certain way, gone over the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. And what worries me on financing very much is that the international resources are very limited. And we are really lacking enough resources for two things, for both mitigation and adaptation. In fact, if we can see how much money we have today, or how much money is being provided, and also I mean, the money is very limited. We have around $23 billion or $24 billion for everything. And we have to say that for adaptation, we only have 17 million, while for mitigation, we have much more. Now, the second element I want to say is that the Green Carbon Fund, which was a very important alternative, has gone from concessional to credit. So that means that the burden is on the debtors and not on the creditors. And I believe that we have to come back to some sort of differentiated response. We need help from developed countries, and this assistance or cooperation should come both in financial flows but also on technology. Our impression is that technology transfer should be provided to the least developed countries and to the middle income countries for free, by the way, for example, for energy transition, for two or three sectors that are so key for this transition, because otherwise it's not going to be possible. I heard very clearly what the senator from Rondonia was saying, that the indigenous communities really prefer to go and deforest and take out the tropical forest, because they want to have milk, they want to have meat, they want to have other resources. So we have to find ways on how they can become the providers of environmental services and can be well paid for that. And I think we have to look into these alternatives. But anyway, I think financial resources are crucial. We need to also make sure that the multilateral development banks, as Pascal Confant was saying for Europe, really fund those projects that are aligned with less fossil fuels, with carbon-free investments. And so we really need to make this transition happen through the financial elements and instruments. So over to you, Carlos. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado, senhora Alice.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Mr. Pascal Confant, would you like to say anything? Would you like to?
Congresswoman Depra, would you like to comment on the question on financing? O senador Confúcio pediu a palavra.
Senator Confúcio wants to speak. Senator Confúcio, please. I have already spoken, but the traditional communities do need higher support. It's not that the indigenous want to deforest. They need protection. They need inspection, protection, and also one against the occupation of their territories. Basically, that's it. And they live on a traditional way. So we gotta respect that. We have to foster and support that, especially now, in mid-pandemic, when indigenous communities, given their low immunity, they are susceptible to get sick and the occurrence of one more genocide to indigenous communities. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I believe that the topic of indigenous peoples is not only the case of Rondônia, but as we have seen from the American representative, it is a worldwide topic. Well, now, because time is nearly up, I'm going to invite Mr. Nick Fabian-Sick. He was actually gonna open the session, and fortunately, we are going to have him in the closing session. Thanks, Nikki, for insisting in your participation and joining us. Nick, you have the floor. Thank you.
Bem, agora
Well, let me see here. We have a few more questions. I think the main question now is, you could send it to the senators regarding the initiatives that the Federal Senate has been doing recently. An important topic for sustainable development is sanitation. The Senate has just passed a bill, and we have many questions for and against this topic. I know we have senators that had different opinions and votes in this topic. That's an opportunity for them. Maybe I would start from Senator Confúcio, or Stevenson, or Jacques Wagner. Would any of you like to talk? Senator Jacques Wagner, would you like to comment on this question? I would quickly because of the time, and then we'll let other fellows speak. I am very proud to say that after 8 years as Bahia's governor, I was a governor that most extended waters for populations, especially in the countryside, and the government that most invested in sanitation in the history of Bahia State. For 8 years, for Embas, which is our public company for sanitation, we invested over 8 billion reais in states and federal money for sanitation. We started on the rural zone from 27 to 72% access to water. In cities like Vitória da Conquista, which is the third largest in population in our state, We did for the first time a sanitation unit that is the most modern in the north and northeast in Brazil with public money. So I'm a little worried because the way we approach a distorted way, saying that if you voted against the new bill, you voted against sanitation. That is not true. The problem we have to face is that in a country with so much poverty like Brazil, the private initiative will only be interested in water and sanitation in big cities that give an ROI, reasonable ROI. In Bahia, it's been 13 and a half years of government. We don't have any issues in the partnership with the private initiative, including sanitation. There is a public-private partnership with a private company for the submarine emission that pays for this service, like hospitals, highways, a soccer stadium. I think they're selling an illusion to say that with the new milestone, we're going to have billions in investment. There's only going to be investment to buy the services that have already been installed, because there aren't any large housing nucleus with that installed. Well, if we have millions of Brazilians without water and sanitation access is in the poor areas that are not of the private initiative interest because there's no ROI. So in my opinion, and I'd like to insist that I have hospitals, basic sanitation unit in partnership with the private initiative. I don't have a dogma here. So I think that they're selling an illusion. Many state sanitation companies perhaps will be bought by the private initiative. But then in Manaus, that was privatized 20 years ago, in the capital of the Amazon, is today one of the 100 largest cities, the 6th worst in sanitation service. Macapá, which is the capital of Amapá State, the city of our dear president of the Federal Senate, Davi Alcolumbre. It has never been governed by a leftist that could be against it. And no private initiative company was interested because the population is relatively small. So I think it would be more intelligent if we could open capital and public sanitation companies would invest 45% of private investment and improve their management. Of course, if you share private and public management, that would be better. I was against it because I don't think that sanitation is going to reach the four corners of Brazil. I don't think that's going to happen. Thank you, Senator Jacques Wagner. Senator Confúcio Moura has also raised his hand. Senator Moura, please. Well, Senator Stevenson Valentin has also raised his hand. So let's move to Senator Stevenson, and then we go back to Confúcio. Senator, you have the floor. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, loud and clear. Well, I didn't want to speak before Senator Confúcio because he's older than me. Senator Jacques Wagner, I am for. I wish every governor was just like you, worried about basic sanitation with running water, but you know that's not the reality. United States like ours in the Northeast, this is forgotten because underground works don't conquer votes, so the people don't favor that. The drain issue in our country is complex. 50% don't have it. Figures say that 50% don't have running water or drain, or when they do, they don't have the chance to process that. And that is one of the bottlenecks of the development and pollution, sustainability. Consider the citizen that complains there's works in front of his house. He doesn't want holes in his street. Even the managers that don't have this view to run these such important works, we would have for each dollar, each invested dollar, we would have an ROI of 5 or 6 or even more in health. I'm speaking about my state because there's been a big publicity a few years ago and a big international loan for sanitation in our capital, but what happened is that the outskirts were still the same. I visited them. They still have open drainage, kids playing. So I voted for that because we're not going to privatize that. On the contrary, we have to give the opportunity to that because we generate jobs, and there's a possibility that people, not through public companies, but through private companies, the people can use sanitation. I acknowledge the issue of small municipalities or our outskirts where companies do not want to invest. But you have to agree that it's easier for the population, for the courts to charge from a private rather than a public company. So I believe that the private initiative moves the country's economy and drives the company's economy. I think there has been an opportunity for years, and the public companies haven't fulfilled their basic role as in large areas in our country. The abandonment of open air drainage. So I think and I bet that we can improve. But within in 6 years' time, we can change that. So politics has got to be dynamics. One of our goals is to help people, of course. And I'd like to finish off by saying I'm going to go again with an argumentation of those that voted favorable, saying that they're going to privatize the areas. But public companies are still going to fulfill their role, but the market that is large, promising, and wasn't yet supplied can be occupied by the private companies, as I've said. So thank you very much. I am sorry, but there is no source sound to be heard. Carlos Musi, I think your mic is closed. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
No.
Musi, we can't hear you. Thank you, Senator. Camila, we couldn't hear Musi. I think he's back on track now. His mic is closed. I can't lip read. Well, that happens in a live session, right? I do apologize. No, we cannot hear you. Could you please reconnect your headset? Senator, given the time, I would suggest that you would move on to closing sessions. If Alicia would like to say something before we close the event. Alicia, mic is yours. Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored to have Senator Jacques Wagner with us. Thank you. What a great event, great discussion, and I hope we can continue this this dialogue together. I want to thank Carlos Lucy, Camila, and all the senators that have joined us today. Stevenson, Valentin, from the Big Push Commission, the Senator Fabiano Contarato, to Confucio Moura, and of course, unfortunately, we couldn't hear Lick Vabensi, but I know that he's highly interested in taking part. Pascal Confan, I think he gave a very good look. Deborah Falland from the Congresswoman from the United States. And of course, I hope we can continue. Senator Jacques Wagner, thank you very much. I'm very happy that you guys had me today. Back to you, Camila. Thank you, Mrs. Alicia. Senator Jacques Wagner, so you have the floor to close our event. So, before anything, I'd like to thank and highlight ECLAC's work here in Brazil, Carlos Mussi, Camila, and also you, Mrs. Alicia, as the Executive Secretary for CEPAL, for ECLAC. You guys were great since the beginning of our subcommission. You guys are a giant in helping us thrive the idea of the big push of sustainability, of environmental and social sustainability, and also economic sustainability. I'd like to thank the Senate team that supported us, my team from my office, particularly Jorge Messias, that's always been ahead. He's very dedicated and a great supporter of this initiative. And I'd like to confirm that on July 26th, we're going to celebrate 100 years of Celso Furtado's birth. He is one of the icons for ECLAC, forward thinker. He said that growth is not development, and growth is only development when it also brings social inclusion and now environmental sustainability. So if economic growth concentrates income and hinders environment and provokes a social gap with 700 million people living under the poverty line, this is not entitled to be called development. So I'd like to thank and say that we are closing this month of July, which is the Green Month, and thank God we were able to finish, however, virtually. I'd rather have all of you in a face-to-face environment. We can hold each other and greet each other. But anyways, we're going to finish this event. It is very important to highlight that we got the signatures for a constitutional amendment of the green environment to include in our constitution a state policy, the valuing of green jobs. There were many projects in the Environment Commission. I'd like to greet my dear fellow Senator Comparato, President of the Commission, Chairman of the Commission. He is highly dedicated to have this agenda considered, and also about awareness. Our former governor and Senator Confucio was very happy to say that we need to have an ecologically sustainable development. One that is, he's a man from the Amazon. He was the governor of Rondônia, and he's very intimate with native peoples. It's very important to have this combination of different views, right? I agree with those who said that poverty, not only poverty, I would say that the use and the poverty is the twin soul of degradation of environment. Because in misery, people look for any forms of livelihood, and exploitation only considers individual profits. So this is a very important meeting. I'm very happy that we suggested the under commission of big push, the sustainability push in the environment condition, and have Senator Confucio as my vice chairman, Senator Stevenson as my rapporteur, and the testimonies we had today point to the future. And I'd like to leave a provocation here. We say international progressives, international, right-wing international. We need to bring an international of sustainability, an international that links all the heads, regardless of their conviction, if they're progressist or conservative or liberals. They have to know that our bigger house, which is planet Earth, cannot stand the mysteries that we have promoted. So I don't think it's going to be called International of Sustainability or Alliance for a Sustainable Life in the Planet. But I'd like to start to build this network, because we have the common sense to say, so everything we can, depending on the doses, depending on how much. So thanks, ECLAC, for inspiring me to create this under commission. I'd like to thank my chairman, Contarato, Confucio, Stevenson, as I said, a new senator. God bless your words. But maybe it could be I'm nearly 70 here, and I know how private sector works, and that's why I mentioned Manaus. It's been 20 years they privatized. 20 years ago, it's the sixth worst city. But may God hear and listen to you. Hopefully, the private initiative with social responsibility is going to invest. Anyways, thank you, Messias, Camila, Carlos Mussi, and the whole ECLAC, our dear guests, high-level commission here, the President of the Environment in the European Union, the American Congresswoman, I'm sorry, our Chilean friend here, and Dr. Alicia. I hope that the provocations made here can give birth to new ideas, and we senators that have public responsibility can raise this environmental awareness across our dear brothers and sisters. Thank you, Senator. Do you hear me now? I'm really sorry. It's the old live TV that used to happen, where anything can happen on live internet. Thank you for joining us, Senator Jacques Wagner and his team, especially Jorge, and all those that worked hard to hold this webinar. Mrs. Alice is with us today. Thank you for joining us. It's a holiday in Chile, and as you said, God is giving us the opportunity to see and review things, especially in the day of St. Pedro and São Paulo, St. Peter and São Paul. So I'd like to thank those that are watching us. We have written down the questions. We're going to try and answer those. And see you in our next webinar, and hopefully it's going to be on July 26th to celebrate Celso Furtado. Thank you very much. All my best to all of you.